Yeah, it looks like we're recording. You should see an icon if you're in Zoom to tell, and in class, it's this button right here above the red dot. I don't think you can see that quite in Zoom. We'll close that to hide the feedback. There we go. But we're now recording the class. We'll wait to right at 4:30 to get started. And we made it. Welcome back, everyone. I don't know why I said welcome back, but welcome to the spring semester, everyone. Looks like we're ready to get started. And I was going to ask, Haley says, it gave me a little message at the top. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't actually know about that. Thanks for telling me. So if you ever notice that I just seem to have forgotten to record the class, anyone can just interject at any point and just say, hey, Mike, you forgot to hit the record button. And that'd be terrific. I'd appreciate that. Anything like that is never considered rude. Any other questions at the moment or comments to start us out? That's a great question. So the question was, what should we bring to class on each day? And I would say the way the class is set up, it's going to be fundamentally informed by how you learn the best. So a lot of people are going to learn the best by just taking ordinary notebook paper, pretend this is paper, and just work along with this as we go on notebook paper. For other people, if you're worried about, say, issues of trying to write down things fast enough, sometimes there's long formulas to worry about. You can come to class having this document right here, either pulled up on a tablet or a laptop or just plain printed out. And basically what this is it's our lecture notes. It's what we're going to be doing in class today. We'll be finishing up this section on Thursday's class. It's kind of like a worksheet in a sense. There's lots of white space. We'll be filling in the solutions and saving this up as we go. And so you could come to class by having either this printed out or downloaded, and that would get you all set up as well. And I'd say for even another set of individuals, there are rare individuals out there that learn just fine simply by observing. So if you're one of those and it's been working so far, you don't have to change a thing. But I think for most people, me included, I personally learn best the more active I am, the more my hands are doing something, just writing things down, for example, fiddling with the lecture notes after I download them. It makes things a little bit more tactile and makes the brain just more involved with the content and easier to learn. Haley asks, will we have any assignments due this week? No, definitely not. Our due dates are going to occur on the next upcoming week. So we'll go a little bit slow getting started on this week. We're going to spend some time talking about the syllabus, the entire Canvas webpage that you see here, as well as doing the homework system web assign as well. So that's going to be our major objective today. And we'll spend a little bit of time getting started in section 2.1, kind of talking about what is this course all about? What is calculus? What kind of problems are we trying to solve? So nothing due just yet this week. I'll make all due dates pretty apparent through the WebAssign system. We'll have quizzes as well with published due dates as well that are very visible on the Canvas page. Other questions or comments at the moment? Okay, if you have a question at any point, if it just popped into your head, never hesitate to interject. And it's kind of hard to come up with questions right now. We are just getting started, but this is my first class this semester where people did have good questions. So thank you for that engagement. One of the things I want to talk about right away is this is a pretty bizarre class. Some of us are in Zoom, 18 of us, I guess that includes me. Some of us are in class. And so it's probably a good idea to just start out by discussing how the class is going to operate between the two modes. Mary asked, I was looking at WebAssign earlier. Do we have to pay for the access or is there access code for us to use? So the way the access is going to work is it's going to work through this link right here. There will be no access code that you have to use if you're within the ISU book bundle program. If you opted out of that book bundle program, you can buy an access code online after the 2-week trials access expires. Does that make sense about the WebAssign? Okay, we'll talk about it quite a bit more today, as well as tomorrow's class to see how this all goes. And pretty much, if you're already in WebAssign, you probably used a temporary access to get started in there, and then you're on the right track. What ISU is going to do through the Book Bundle program is work with the company Cengage and WebAssign to see who's in the book bundle. It does take them a little bit of time to go through all their spreadsheets. And if you're in the book bundle program, then they just auto complete your access. There's nothing you would have to buy. Essentially, you already paid for it through the book bundle program. If you opted out, I'll give you some instructions for registering. I believe the dollar cost for registering out of pocket through this website is about $117, if I remember correctly. And I can get that exact figure and instructions. But thanks for the question so far. So, like we were mentioning earlier, it's a weird class we're doing. The in-person section is 09, the online section is 19. And if you're in the in-person section, you know exactly how the screen looks up here in the projector. But for everyone in Zoom, I think there's a lot that you can't see. There's a lot of mystery here. So this is usually a good idea to just start off class to get everyone on the same page of what this all looks like. Let me hide that again. This is what it really looks like for people in Zoom on the desktop. It's really pretty busy, if you might notice. If I was to want people's cameras on, that's like impossible, right? It takes up so much screen real estate to see everybody. So for this class, you definitely don't have to have your camera on whatsoever. So what I usually do is I take this entire block right here and I minimize it so it looks more like this instead. So this is the screen I try to actually run so that we have some extra real estate here. Here's where we're going to be using the lecture notes, kind of like a whiteboard, solving the problems. And there's a couple fields that I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to. Let me go to, oh, hang on. I'm missing my draw tools on this. That's really weird. Let me see if I could just re-plug it in and get it going. I use a digital pen, by the way, that usually has something that says draw, but for this class, for some reason, it's not there. We'll just manage for the moment. I'll use the annotation tools. The areas that I'm going to be paying most attention to are going to be right here. This tells me who's currently talking in Zoom, as well as right here as well. I'll try to always keep the participation list visible. Notice how there's a scroll bar. There's almost too many people in this class alone to see everybody at once. So there's a student at the very bottom that I can't even see. But anyone that interacts through the Zoom platform gets pushed up to the top, whether you're talking, maybe you're using a live reaction like the thumbs up or hands up things. Any of those kinds of things, I'll try to pay a lot of attention to over here. And there's lots of ways you can participate. The reactions, like we mentioned, you can participate as well through this feature. Using the chat is just totally fine for this class. If you have a microphone attached, that works just as well. But if you feel more comfortable just typing out your answer, or maybe you're in a loud place, something like that, I'll try my best to always pay attention to this at the same time. And when someone sends a chat, what happens right here is there's a little red icon that says one chat I haven't read, or 2, 3, 4, 5, who knows. That's actually really easy for me to miss. My eyes kind of tunnel vision into what I'm looking at, wherever the red dot is usually. And so if you ever notice I missed a chat, anyone in class could just chime in at any point and just say, hey, Mike, there's a chat there, you missed one. And that'd be really helpful, either in class or over Zoom. So this gives you an idea of what this all looks like. And I'll resolve what's going on with my drawing tools in a moment. That's really kind of weird. It's not working. Let's close this out. Let me try reloading the syllabus to see if Microsoft Word is going to give me my drawing tools back. So by the way, I'm using a digital tablet with a pen, and that's what this glove is all about. If you're curious, there's no crazy tattoos or anything. It's just to allow it to glide across the surface. So let me open up the syllabus again. And they're back. I don't know what's going on, but it's kind of like a week one thing. Something breaks randomly in every class, it seems like, until it's fixed. But this is what I was missing. I'll be using these tools here to write on top of the notes. We'll save the results. And that makes this whole thing seem like a weird kind of whiteboard. So going through the syllabus, one thing I want to mention right away is I'm not too concerned on which section you registered in. '09 is meant to be the Idaho Falls section. So if you registered for this section, the idea is you're coming to class regularly. This is the online section, so you'll come to class through the Zoom. But really, for as far as Zoom goes, the link's right here. Everyone in the online section found it. I'm not going to police who uses that. So if you're in the fully online section and you're just in town and you decide to come to class, stage E215, you're welcome to do so. I'm not going to say, hey, you're in the wrong section. You're supposed to be in Zoom. I think it'd be terrific if you came to class. And vice versa. If you're in the in-person section, but maybe you're sick one day, or maybe it actually snowed this winter and you couldn't make it to class, then you can join through Zoom as well. I'm not going to say if you're in the in-person section, you can't use that. That would seem kind of crazy, and I have no way of policing it either. So use this as much as it makes sense, whichever section you're in. I think if you make it to class and you're participating, then that's great, whichever way is most comfortable. Well, class meetings, we've all figured that out. We're all here. We'll start sharp at 4:30. We'll try to end at a reasonable time. I'm going to try to go for a 5:45, but sometimes our problems are a little bit long. We might end at, say, a 5:42. We do a final call for questions. We'll often end a couple minutes early. Getting it right on the minute to ending is sometimes kind of a challenge, unless we break a problem in half, which is tough to do. As far as the office hours go for this class, if you need to get help for any issue, maybe a question about class, question about WebAssign, maybe it's a question about an upcoming quiz or anything in the homework system, the two modes that you can get in contact with me are through these two here. First are the office hours. I run office hours 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday without an exception. I'll just be here. In CHE 215 if you're coming in person. At the same time, I'll have Zoom open on this monitor as well during office hours. And so I could possibly have several students in person and over Zoom, and we'll just take everyone's question in turn if we get kind of busy in office hours. So that'd be a great way to engage, to get extra help or get questions answered. Another way you can get extra help is, well, I publish my cell phone number in case of emergencies, but this one could have a kind of a long delay since it's silenced most of the day. But I'm really responsive on my email as well. In fact, on every machine that I come to, except for this one, because we're teaching class right now, but aside from that, for every machine I'm at, a laptop or a desktop, I always have a Chrome browser here with Gmail pulled up. The moment it says one new message, it's like a compulsion. I have to check it out. I always try to be extremely responsive on email. And you can ask me anything through email. It could just be a really fast question, or maybe you're working a problem in the homework system, or maybe even a quiz problem. You can send me a screenshot of what you're working on to try to get extra help. Maybe it didn't accept an answer. You could take a picture of it or an actual screenshot, send it to my email, and I'll take a look at it with you. So this can turn into another kind of office hours. It just has a bit of a delay since, even if I'm right there on my computer, it'll be 1 or 2 minutes before you see your reply. Other thing I want to mention about this email address here is I could miss your email if I'm in class, or if you're working late, I might miss your email, but I don't mind when you send your email. If you have a bout of insomnia and you're just working at 2:30 a.m., for example, for any reason, and you have a question, that's the best time to just write it up and send it out. It's not going to disturb me, and I'll be able to check out those emails when I start my day. So feel free to email me or drop in office hours at any time, and I'll be happy to help out. Really, we've already gone through a big chunk of the syllabus. Any questions or comments at the moment? Okay, I probably could have labeled this better. This is the Canvas webpage. You go to this URL right here, you'll just go to your personal Canvas page and then just click on this link right here. Biocalculus is just the name of the textbook. Survey of Calculus is the actual course. And pretty much everything that we do in class is going to be here some way, shape, or form. So when you come to class, I'll often just have this screen shared. It'll be up on the projector. We'll be scrolled down to whichever section we're working on or whatever topic we're at. And everything that we do gets published here as well. Well, I won't read through the entire syllabus. I'll leave this information for you here. But probably the next major thing we should talk about, the questions that already have come through, is about the online homework system. Really, there's two kinds of homework. We'll have online homework assigned through WebAssign, and we'll also have quizzes at the same time as well. I'm going to assign one quiz per week because my idea with the quizzes is I don't want to give you a whole bunch of work. This is a good amount already. And the quizzes are meant to be really short and fast kind of questions. It's your opportunity to actually write out the mathematics and not just feed it to an online system. So the quizzes kind of bridge the gap between the homework, which is online, which sometimes feels a little vague and foreign, and the quizzes are going to feel a little bit more familiar for what's actually going to be on an exam. So that's what the quizzes are really meant to do. I'll assign them weekly. At the end of the semester, we'll drop the lowest two quizzes. And the bulk of the work is going to be in WebAssign. I wrote here, you can go to webassign.net to get registered. The course ID is this right here. But really the fastest way to get registered in WebAssign, I think about 12 students so far, last I checked, have already done this, is go to this link right here, registering for WebAssign. If you click on this, it auto-populates the right course ID number so that you don't have to worry about mistyping anything in. Click on Access Course. This is the right book that we're going to be using. Click on Continue. Make sure it says Michael Jacobson. It may be weird if it didn't, but that tells you you're in the right place. Then here's where it might differ a little bit. If you already have a WebAssign Cengage account, you can sign in right here. If you've never used WebAssign whatsoever before, you'll have to click on Create a New Account button here. Say you're a student. Give it the email, and this is where I'm kind of stuck at this point because I can't really give it a fake email. If I give it my email, it knows I'm not a student, so it just ends it right there. But you'll go through a registration process on registering your account. You don't have to give it your ISU student number. And the big question that came up was how to pay for the access. Just click on the temporary 2-week access and you'll be fine. You shouldn't pay for anything right now in the semester. If you opted out of the ISU Book Bundle program, then the temporary access will end in 2 weeks and it'll ask for payment. I'll give some instructions for, like we mentioned earlier, getting registered in that case. Well, any questions at the moment about the registration side? Yes, that's right, Haley. I'm going to assign for each section that we have in the class, our very first section looks like it is 2.1, limits of functions at finite numbers. There'll be one homework set per each one section that we have. We might as well take a look at what this all looks like just from the student side. So let's go to WebAssign as a link right here, or you could just type in www.webassign.com. This is slightly faster for me. Let me just click on it. Let's take a look at what the system looks like at the moment. Oh, that's a great question as well. As far as the quizzes, I'm going to post them in Canvas at the very, very bottom. I'm skipping the week 1 quiz because I feel like week 1 is busy enough. We have a lot of other tasks like getting registered for WebAssign. Week 1 tends to be pretty overwhelming. So the very first quiz will be published down here. It's going to look like just an assignment that you click on. It'll give you a PDF with a question that you'll solve by hand. Are there questions at the moment? Okay, well, let's check out the system. Once you're all signed in, you can click on the sign in button, pass the credentials that you made for your account. Let me put that in. And let me show you what the actual system looks like. Let me click on View as Students so that you have a better view of what it looks like. This is the so-called supposed student view, so you wouldn't see this orange band right here. But this is pretty much the experience. Let me hide this zoom control. It's kind of basic in a certain sense. On the left right here, it has the assignment. Here's the first assignment, section 2.1. It says it's due January 15, 2026. You know, that's not quite what I wanted. Let me see if I can fix that. My intention with the due dates is I like a 1 week turnaround. So the moment we finish section 2.1, the due date I like to put in would be exactly 1 week away. So we're on the 13th here. We'll finish section 2.1 likely on the 15th. So the due date should be on the 22nd rather. So sorry for that quick edit there out of nowhere, but it's good to have the accurate information. Let's see if it'll refresh fast enough. So that will be the actual due date. As far as the due dates go, a lot of people want to know what happens if it goes late and I didn't finish it. Well, your score will drop, but you can go back to this exact assignment and finish it out. There's no penalty for doing so. Really, what the due dates are all about is just pacing for staying caught up in the course. The better you're able to stay caught up with this course, the easier it's going to be to study for the exam. The quizzes will make a lot more sense. So think of this as really just pacing. If life gets really busy, maybe some other class has a big project and you're just kind of behind on week 4. If something goes a little past due, that's not going to hurt your grade permanently. You can go back and make up those points penalty free. So again, it's kind of basic. You can click on here to start the homework set. Up here, you can click on the online textbook. And this is what the homework set looks like. Let's click on it. Looks like this particular set has 6 different questions. You can do them in any order you like, but usually it's kind of a slow build. So going in order makes the most sense most often. And for this, we're just putting in numbers and try to get an answer out. This will make a lot more sense once we actually do the section 2.1 notes. If you ever encounter a problem where you're just not sure what's going on with it, or maybe you gave an answer that you know in your heart is right, but it keeps coming out wrong, you have a lot of things to use as tools. First, I can't put unlimited attempts in this system, unfortunately. I do believe unlimited attempts make sense for something like this because we're all learning. We're not going to get it exactly perfect on every single try. And we shouldn't be nickeled and dimed on points when we're just learning through the system. So the amount of attempts I put in the system is 100 attempts. I don't think that limit's ever been hit before. If you notice it a lot, you put in a lot of attempts and it's still just not accepting your answer, click on this button right here, Ask Your Teacher. And I advertise this a lot whenever I teach this course using WebAssign. The reason for that is I feel like people don't use it as often as they could. This is like another version of office hours. When you click on this button, you can put in a message, any message whatsoever. If it's kind of a crazy problem, you don't even know what to say, you can just tell me straight out, help, I have no clue what is going on here. And that's just fine as well. Or you could be more formal. You might say, hey, Mike, I don't know why it doesn't accept 5. What's going on here? Am I missing a concept? Anything you might think is helpful, you can type here. And if it's just help or I do not get it, that's fine as well. When you send this out, what happens is it's going to bounce it to my Gmail account. So I'll see that notification down there. It allows me to go back in the system. It'll tell me the exact problem you're working on, the values you put in, all the attempts, and I'll be able to give you very targeted help on that particular exercise. Sometimes I think people don't use this a lot because you might feel like you're bugging me every time you hit this. But I promise you, I'm a really fast typist. Office hours, and this is a form of office hours really, is part of my job. So you're encouraged to use this as much as you need. If you feel like you're using it on every single question, that's okay. I'm happy to engage. That's part of what my job is all about. So don't feel like you're over asking questions, either directly through email or this button. So that's what the homework system is all about. We'll talk about it more as the weeks progress, more features and ideas of what's going on here, especially after you get registered in WebAssign and using it yourself. Talking about it will make a little bit more sense. But any questions at the moment about it? Okay. One other common question people have is, what if I just have 15 minutes? Maybe I'm taking a break at work and I just decide to do math. I don't know if that's the best mental way to kind of decompress, but depending on your job, maybe it is. If you do one problem here and click submit answer, but then you're just done for the next few hours or maybe even the day, that's okay too. Everything that you hit with submit answer is auto saved, and you can come back into the assignment and just move on to the very next question. No harm done. I hear you, Haley. I think you're talking about the clicking on the ask the teacher button a lot. Okay, so that's how the homework works. All the homework is going to be in this segment right here. There'll be a new thing that says past due assignments, so a different way to access those. Well, I'll show what that looks like once we get to that point. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Some people just like the order structure, the black and white, right versus wrong nature of mathematics. For me personally, I think I'm kind of similar like that. I find this kind of stuff to sometimes be kind of relaxing. English classes were the ones that kind of stressed me out, where everything is kind of gray and foggy. I felt like I never really understood the rubric to an English paper. But math classes, they're very straightforward, so there's some comfort in that. Other thing that happens with this platform is the online textbook is here as well. So if you click on this, my ebook, they'll show something with a really low quality resolution. That's our second edition of the textbook. Whoever did this wasn't paying a lot of attention to their graphic design. Just click on this right here. Then we wait for the textbook to load up, which is kind of a weird experience. We're in chapter 2, so the next thing we'd go is click on that chapter 2 right here. It brings out a table of contents. We're in section 2.1, so you can click on the very top. They'll have the chapter opener, the objectives of what we're trying to solve. And this is the actual literal textbook. What has happened here is they have PDF slides for all the pages of the real physical textbook, and they just upload them directly here. So everything in the real textbook corresponds to this stuff here. You can scroll up and down. This one just has very short amount of time or space, so no scrolling. Click the right arrow to get to the next page. And this is what the reading looks like. There's loads of biology type examples. When you get to a particular example, investigate the function x minus 1, x squared minus 1 for values near x. This one doesn't give some very good instructions, but give it a try. See what happens for values next to 1. Then once you try plugging around with the example with a pencil and pen, scroll down, especially if you get stuck, see what the solution looks like. And that's a great way to actually read the kind of book. The more engaged you are, the more the reading becomes meaningful. The thing that's kind of sad about a math book is they tend to be really, really dry if all you're doing is literally just reading everything you see on page. If I read all this verbatim and then just read all these tables, saw all the values, there's not a lot of mental traction there, not a lot of glue to make that concept stick. But if I'm trying out the problem myself, if I have a pencil and a calculator out, I'm actually plugging in values near 1, like a 0.5, a 0.9, 0.99 into that function and getting some outputs out, you're really engaged now, and this problem becomes a lot more meaningful, and the reading becomes impactful. Well, that's what the textbook looks like. It's a pretty basic textbook. At the very end are the exercises, but that's what WebAssign has done, is just selected a subset of these problems right here for the actual WebAssign exercises in this section. So that's the experience in WebAssign. The majority of the homework will be in that system. And the quizzes, again, are going to be very short and well contained. Usually it's just one problem, maybe one problem with 2 or 3 parts, but the same kind of thing, just doing one operation. It's one thing that shouldn't take too long. Well, been talking for a while now. This class is kind of a tricky one to get started up because WebAssign having a lot of extra things we have to do. Mary asks, will homework only be available when we start a chapter in lecture, or will it ever open earlier? That's a good question. I usually only publish the homework assignment once the notes right here appear on the Canvas page. And the reason for doing so is I revise my notes a lot. I've taught this class a lot, but I feel like each time I teach it, it's worthwhile for me to look back on the way I solved the notes from the last time and make some small changes, sometimes revisions and corrections. So I'm building these out kind of slowly, day by day. After I've written out the notes, I then go back into the WebAssign system here, start constructing the homework exercises so they match very closely on the lecture notes. So for that reason, they're only going to appear once the actual lecture notes appear here as well. Essentially, everything that you're going to be doing at WebAssign is going to be mirrored down here. You'll have very similar problems, not exactly the same problems. That would be very redundant and unhelpful. Different kinds of numbers, different kinds of functions, different contexts for the word problems. But I tried to write my lecture notes to be very highly parallel to what you're doing in WebAssign as well. Other questions about that at the moment, or other questions at all? Okay, I would say one good thing to do so if you haven't done already is we're really just getting started today. We'll do a little bit of work of section 2.1 to kind of see what's going on with what is a limit and why do we care about limits. But if after today, before we come to class on Thursday, if you go get registered for WebAssign, play around the system, open the textbook, see how it all works, then you'll be fully caught up with the course. Again, it's kind of a slow start because of all the extra things that come in with learning the WebAssign system, getting all registered. But we'll be going in earnest once we're back on week 2. And that's when we'll have our very first quiz. Well, we talked about most of the stuff on the syllabus. Other things are just kind of the standard stuff you'd see. We'll have 3 in-person exams. They'll be 75 minutes in length, a 2-hour final exam. For all exams, there are going to be closed notes. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. There are going to be closed notes and closed book. But I do attach a formula sheet at the back of every one of our exams. Some things we do have to memorize in a math class, but in some chapters, especially when they get very, very formula heavy, I do put those formulas onto the back of the exams so that the exam is going to be more about can you use this technical formula if it's provided, less about trying to memorize every single formula whatsoever in the textbook. And I did mention their in-person exams, which feels kind of weird because we said before, this is the fully online section. And I wish our math department wouldn't say fully online because our math department, the department head, Dr. Patrick Ralt, has a policy for every math class at ISU with an in-person exam requirement, even for the supposedly fully online classes. So the way it's going to work is if you're in this section, it's assumed that you would take the exam in person in the classroom, CHE 215, where I'm at right now. If you're in this section right here, then it's assumed that you'll be taking the exam in a testing center. I'm going to be emailing every single student, regardless of what section you're in, and just double checking. I'll write an email to people in this section and say, I see you're in the in-person section. Will you be able to take the exam in person in the classroom, or do you prefer a testing center? So if you feel like you're actually a fully online student, but you're in the wrong section, that's going to be okay. For everyone in this section here, I'll be sending you a direct email through the Canvas system, just asking you, where is your preferred testing center? It might be on the Idaho Falls Campus Testing Center, the Pocatello Campus Testing Center. Some people might be further remote, say closer to Twin Falls, Meridian, and so on. If you're, say, even farther out, we'll make some arrangements. Well, any questions at all, folks, about the in-person exam requirement? Okay, I'll probably be sending out those emails, getting everything organized, probably on Monday or Tuesday of week 2. That's that way that the actual roster stabilizes a little bit, and we're not doing too many things at once just on week one. We'll come back to some of the information here about testing and the policies as we get closer and closer to each exam. But for the moment, there is a calculator policy. So for the calculator that we're allowed to have for exams, it can't be a graphing calculator. We'll be going for just the basic scientific calculators like these two models here. Haley says, will the people going to the testing centers have to do so at a designated time, or do we make the time? Well, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking about that. So it turns out it's going to be really just up to you. Like you said, you'll be able to schedule a time to take the exam that makes the most sense in the day. So coming down here for the day-by-day schedule, this is a tentative schedule, but the things that are firm are the actual exam dates, exams 1, 2, and 3. Our first exam is going to be Tuesday of this week, so that'd be February 3rd, but it can be taken at any time of the day that makes the most sense to you. For the in-person section, it'll be from the time that our class meets. We'll be here for exam 1 between 4:30 p.m. and 5:45 p.m. Other questions so far? Okay, well, below the other exciting thing about the course is the breakdown. I put a lot of weight on the homework and web assign. This will be worth 15% of the entire course. Note, that's half the final exam. It's worth more than one single exam. Exams 1 through 3 are going to be averaged and be worth 40% of the course. So the homework is one of the bigger elements, and so is the quizzes. Together, this is 30% of the entire grade in the class. It makes up an entire final exam. And there's kind of a logic to this. The thought is, if you're being really diligent, working on the homework assignments, maybe some come past due, but you go back and make them up, ask questions when you need help, and do really well here, then the quizzes are going to make a lot more sense. And when the quizzes, if you're doing your quizzes diligently, getting them all solved, if you're getting through those, that's going to make the exams make a lot more sense, because my exams are based on what we did in class, what you did on WebAssign, and what the quizzes were. And once you get through exams 1 through 3, the final exam is not an exam that's going to make or break anybody's grade. If you're doing really well in exam 3, keep studying for the final exam. It will be comprehensive, but it won't be that bad. I'm sorry for missing the chats that came through. So has it been on those dates, on Tuesday, but anytime correct? That's mostly correct, but it turns out some of the testing centers, like the Pocatello Testing Center, it can potentially fill up, which is kind of a big problem if I say you can only schedule it on Tuesday. So I do give some flexibility. I allow it to be scheduled on a Monday, Tuesday, or even a Wednesday the next day, just in case something happens with the testing center. If they got filled up on one particular day, this can happen in Pocatello, then there is flexibility on even the day you schedule the exam. And another question, which is a great one, how long do you think the exams will take overall? Well, it's a 75-minute window to actually do the exam, but my goal is not to write an exam where your hand is writing the entire 75 minutes. That would be kind of insane. It'd be hard to grade because that's a lot of stuff. What I'm really going for is an exam that's really going to be about 60 minutes in length, with the last 15 minutes really just for checking your work, making sure that the numbers make sense, and double checking your results. So I'm not going to go for an exam that's really, really excruciatingly long. They're kind of short and sweet in a certain sense, just the main topics that we have to be familiar with. Haley says, for Pocatello, you may have to schedule either a week ahead or early on Monday. Yeah, that's true as well. As far as the scheduling goes on exams, thanks for mentioning that. I have them listed here in Canvas, and that's partially for me as well. I'm checking Canvas a lot as we scroll through the weeks. Before we even get to week 3, what I'm already doing in Canvas is I'm updating the information here. I'm going to say exactly what the coverage is going to be on our exam 1. I'm going to post extra documents below, exam review problems and those kinds of things to help out. I'll tell you exactly what formulas are actually provided on exam 1, so you'll know what you have to memorize, what's provided on the very last page. And right around at the start of week 3, probably on a Monday, that's when I'm going to be emailing you instructions. I'll give you a link which you'll use to schedule a time and day for your exam. So yeah, I try to be way on the ball, because if I gave you that information on week 4, the week of the actual exam, like you mentioned, the people on the Pocatello Testing Center might get kind of pissed because they don't like same day scheduling. We have to schedule a little bit ahead. So I'll try to be always way on the ball for that, give you the information for scheduling before the actual exam week itself. The question was if the exams are multiple choice. I don't think I do have any multiple choice questions on this course. Pretty much what the exams are going to look like is going to be very similar to what we're actually doing in class. So here's the first set of lecture notes. I might not have a problem verbatim like this one, but the reason it's here for the lecture notes is there's similar problems in the actual homework assignment. And a problem like this could be your real exam question. So the actual notes we solved, let me open up a version that's a little bit bigger. Here's our first set of lecture notes, 2.1. All of these problems you see here are what a real bona fide exam question could really look like. So example one, example 2, we'll solve these in full. We'll give a lot of detail on how it goes. And this is about what your real exam questions are going to look like. And Haley says, will the lecture notes be the best bet for studying or as a study guide? That's a great question as well. As far as best bet goes, that's kind of hard to answer, but I give multiple resources for exam 1. I wonder if I can pull up an actual website to show you. The last time I taught this was in Moodle, so let me show you what this would look like. Moodle is still alive if you still remember that system. I didn't feel like I typed that password in right, but here we are. So that worked. And let me go to, here is the last time I taught this class, spring 2025. And this is what it looked like when we came up to exam 1. I gave the formula sheet that was going to be provided, and I gave several versions of the sample exam problems. Version 1, this comes out of the actual textbook. So that textbook that we previewed, I selected these as very similar questions that could show up on a real exam 1. Some people love these. If you're reading the textbook and you like looking into the textbook answers, you just have to click on a problem that's on and it shows you the answer right away. So you get some good feedback if you're on the right track. So version 2, like you mentioned, is the lecture notes the best bet for studying? I'd say it's pretty good. And so what I do is I also take my original lecture notes, I take out all the formulas, theorems, and I turn them into what an exam question would actually look like. So this is a 10-page packet of problems that could be bona fide exam problems. The only downside of this is these are problems we have solved. So they might feel kind of old and too familiar. Like we'll solve this problem particularly in our course. So it starts to lose value as you solve this one over and over again. And so I give a version 3. These are brand new problems. Some of them are a little bit more challenging. Those won't be on the real exam. They'll be at the same difficulty we do in class. And so there'll be 3 different versions altogether to take a look into. But really, there's a 4th version. The 4th version is going to be the quizzes that we'll assign. My quizzes are kind of like a heads up or just a really big hint. This is what I feel like fits as a really great exam question. It's just one particular question. So if you go through all the quizzes that were assigned before exam 1, it won't be a ton, but those 2 quiz problems will be a great guide for what you should be familiar with on the exam. And by the time you're, say, all the way down here studying for the final exam, put all of your quizzes together, that makes up a really good review for even the final exam as well. We'll have about 12 quizzes altogether. These have been really great questions so far. Thanks for asking about these, folks. Any further questions at the moment or different questions or comments? Yes, the quiz will only be one question. I mean, I guess that's kind of depending on how you view it. Sometimes instructions will say something like differentiate. We'll figure out what that means. And there'll be three subproblems. So three fast problems where you do an operation on a problem. Or if it's kind of like a longer question, maybe it's a word problem, it's just going to be one problem in that case. Other questions so far? Yeah.
What is the grading going to be like? We need to get 100%, or will there be like simple errors, or can we get partial points, or how is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exam.
Yeah, for exams on the grading, it's going to be graded on partial credit. Yeah.
Okay.
So as far as it goes, if you make some simple mistakes like a sign error, maybe an algebraic mistake, but the fundamental calculus you're doing just right, you might be getting all the credit on that kind of problem. So if we imagine, say, a problem that's 5 points altogether, 5 points means it was totally perfect. If I take off 1 point, maybe it's just something really small, a sign error, like I said, small algebraic error, but you get the gist of how the problem goes. You might lose like 3 points, 4 points, or maybe all the credit if there was just no actual progress in the right direction for the concept of the question. But that would be maybe something that we just weren't familiar with the concept on. So yes, I will be grading on partial credit. And part of the reason that's why I like to assign the quizzes. The quizzes give you really good feedback on what does an exam question look like, but also how is an exam question actually graded in the very first place. I'll give you comments on the correctness, what's missing, if you need to show more steps and that kind of stuff, so that when you go to turn around to do this on an exam setting, you'll feel like it's, well, just like maybe 6 or 7 quizzes just squashed together that you're solving, which is another way to say my exams are going to be between about 6 or 8 questions altogether. Other questions at the moment? Yeah.
Do you have any idea about the math center hours for this semester?
This semester for the Math Center hours, I'm not too sure on the Idaho Falls campus, but that's a great question. Let me click over here. I have a set of reminders. Find the Math Center hours for IF and Pocatello and post them to Canvas. I'm going to investigate that, figure out what the hours are. And when I post them in Canvas, they're probably going to be somewhere up here, maybe under the syllabus or something like that. Yeah. And for the Idaho Falls campus specifically, the Math Center is over there in room 220. And usually they get going on week 2 is when they have their schedule. Sometimes it's published right outside the door that you could take a look into. But if you're on the Pocatello campus, it can all be a little bit more trickier, I think. Emily asks, are there retake on exams or quizzes? So there's no retake or corrections on either the exams or quizzes. But as far as the quizzes go, the quizzes are kind of also a participation credit as well. I don't offer retakes on the quizzes or the exams. So once you submit the quiz, the grade is finalized. But I wouldn't worry too much about, say, losing a whole bunch of the 15% right here because maybe you made a couple mistakes on the quiz. That would be kind of horrible in a certain sense. So I do drop the lowest 2 quizzes. So if there's a couple that you didn't turn in, only the third missing quiz is really going to hurt you. But quizzes are really, they're serving 2 purposes. They bridge the gap between what does a problem in the online homework look like as a real exam question. The other purpose of the quiz is really it's just a participation credit fundamentally. Quizzes being a participation credit means the way I grade every quiz in this class is going to be out of 10 points. If you participated by handing in your quiz, you get 5 points by default. And the rest of the points are just for correctness. And over the years that I've taught this class, I've taught it quite a few times. Usually people who are turning in their quizzes on time, they're doing really great on this end right here. Because it's a participation credit, another interesting thing I forgot to say about quizzes is that they're open. They're take-home quizzes. I'm not going to have you do them, say, in class with your books closed and all that kind of thing. You have all the resources. Because the quizzes are open in that sense, you can ask me questions about the quiz. Really, you're just participating in the class. So if you ever see a quiz, you're just not sure you did it right, you can send me a screenshot of what you're working on. I'll be happy to help out. You're welcome to work on quizzes with each other as well. So if you're in the in-person section or the online section, if you recognize any names or faces and you want to engage with people, work with them, then that'd be totally fine as well. So you can work together on quizzes. You can ask me direct help for quizzes and office hours through email. And this becomes, even though there's no retakes or corrections on quizzes or exams, it means that getting good credit on this is really not too hard to do. And as far as no retakes or correction on exams 1 through 3 goes, that does feel kind of severe, but I do have an extra credit policy that does come up relative to the exams. Here's what it looks like. So this is the old course, spring 2025. And I run this policy pretty much every class I teach, unless the math department says I can't do so. Let's see where it's hit. Here it is, this one. The extra credit policy I publish relative to exams, I don't give exam rewrites, but I allow this to happen. If your final exam grade is higher than the minimum grade among exams 1, 2, and 3, then I replace that minimum grade with your final exam grade. So if you ever have one rough exam, really it's not going to completely drop your course. It can be made up through the final exam itself. I'll be publishing this on our Canvas webpage as we get closer and closer to the final exam, way down here on the bottom. Other questions at the moment? Okay, I appreciate the engagement in this class. Every class is a little bit different. I've taught 2 other classes so far, and this is the first class that really actually had a lot of earnest, awesome, graded questions. So thanks for the participation. Yeah, that's great to hear. I feel like it's really just a sense of fairness. Allowing the final exam to replace a minimum exam grade just means if you had a rough exam, but you relearned that content, you came back strong on the final exam, you should be completely penalized on that minimum grade. So that's the reason I felt like that's a pretty fair policy for my classes that I teach. There's some classes like intermediate algebra, math 1108, where the math department controls my syllabus and I can't actually do that. But I try to run that policy in pretty much all of my classes. Well, this is pretty much the entire syllabus and the grade breakdown. I have the day-by-day schedule here. One thing I forgot to mention, however, is I learned something early this morning. Survey of Calculus class that we're doing updated their textbook to edition 2, and that's awesome. There's nothing bad about that. That doesn't cause any problem on your end. But they scrambled the sections. So I had a section 2.2 here. Some people might remember it. Some people might notice it's still right there, section 2.2. But I had to change that out because when I saw the new edition, that they changed the number of the sections, this is the actual section 2.1 that we're going to be starting with to match our actual second edition of the textbook. So I'm going to have to revise the syllabus, the day-by-day one, and put in the exact section numbers. I'll probably have that done before we come back to class on week 2. Yeah, sorry about that. When I go to make that revision, what it'll say at the very top is revised right here. I'll say revised on the file. I'll probably make an announcement about it. Hey, I changed the syllabus. I'll say revised here as well. And that's all I'm going to be changing is the day-by-day syllabus to reflect the order of the sections are different. It's the same math stuff, but they're covering them with the different section numbers and in slightly different orders as well. Okay, so we've talked about just about the entire syllabus so far. The only thing left is just the university resources. If this is your first semester at ISU, as painful it is, I would say take a good 15-minute break from your day and do actually read all of these statements here. That's kind of tedious and awful, but if you read them once, you pretty much know how they go for each other course at ISU. These are pretty standard statements. Some of them are extremely important, like the federal Title IX law you should be familiar with. Statement on services is just equally important. Academic complaints and grievances is a process that you should be aware of. Really, this is more about student rights on this block right here. Something goes wrong in your class, if something just feels unfair, and you'll know what unfair really is, then there is a process for addressing it. You would first contact the instructor. That could be me. If you don't like the answer from your instructor on what you feel like is a grievance, you always have the ability to escalate. And people don't always tell you that. You could take this up to the department chair, Dr. Ralt. If you don't like what Dr. Ralt says, for whatever issue that came up that just didn't seem quite fair in your mind, you can go further to the Dean of the College of Science and Engineering, to the Provost of Students, and so on. And you'll know if you need to take it that far. You'll know in your heart that something happened in my class that isn't right. Maybe I took a class and no, the teacher never graded my homework. That's a kind of an extreme example. And I didn't do well in that class as a result. That's a grievance, and that's something that you have student rights relative to. So everything in here really is pretty important. I encourage you to read through it. But if you read them once, it's pretty much the same statements each and every time. In chat, it was asked, I was looking at all the exam dates, and it looks like our first one is February 3rd, and our second one is February 10th. Uh-oh, I may have a mistake here. Our second exam should be on March 10, so Tuesday of this week. Let me double check the Canvas. So here, our exam 1 is on February, and our exam 2, yeah, it's going to be, oh, that's weird, February 10th. Thanks for spotting that. That's a typo on my end. That should have said March 10. Thanks for spotting that. Really sharp eye. Because that was my mistake. It was a bit of just an invisible error to me. Yeah, me too. Once I read that February, wait, that can't be quite right. I don't know what I would do between exam 1 and 2 to have actual content there. That makes me suspicious about the other one. Let me take a look at exam 3. Yeah, it's targeted for April on Tuesday, so April 14th. Again, thanks for spotting that error. Everything that we do in this class, particularly once we start doing the lecture notes here, it's all forever. So if you ever notice a mistake, please chime in at any point. It's never rude to point out any mistake that ever occurs, whether it's a scheduling date issue or maybe just a mistake on the actual paper here. Well, any questions or comments so far at the moment? Okay, well, that was a lot of awesome questions. And if you still have some coming, don't hesitate to send more in. Other things to keep in mind about the Canvas webpage is this is going to be pretty much our one-stop shop for everything that happens in this class. When you come into class, whether it's through in person or in Zoom, I'm always going to have this pulled up to whichever week we're working on. All of the lectures that we do are going to be recorded and published in this playlist right here. So this will be updated constantly. I do this right after class. Any materials we work on, like say in section 2.1, we'll be publishing the solutions there. And if you want blank notes, because this one has been filled out, they'll be published here as well. This portion right here, why study calculus, how to study calculus, these are just 2 articles for optional reading. They're not required. But if you're just curious, if you have some time to kill or you want to look into new study habits, these would be great articles to take a look into. But at this point, we'll refresh some of the things we talked about because we've been talking for almost an hour so far, and that's a lot of talking. But I think it's a good idea to now turn over to what are we doing here in these lecture notes. I don't want to get too far in these notes because we've had a busy day already, and week 1 is kind of overwhelming. So I thought probably a good first problem to talk about is, what is our objective really in a calculus class? So this will be just one short kind of example we'll take a look into before we end class, maybe just a little bit early today. Any questions at a moment before we take a look into, well, kind of not exactly a problem, but more a illustration of what we're getting into in this class? I would say that's really going to be kind of up to you. If you like working on notes the way I am doing it, pulling them up, maybe typing or using a digital tool, then yeah, absolutely. Bring either a tablet or a laptop and that'd be great. But if you feel like you work better just using ordinary paper on a notebook, following along in class, then you wouldn't necessarily have to. So it's going to be really up to you. I'd say between weeks 1 and 2, You'll get a good feel for what works best for you. Well, here's pretty much what we're trying to solve in this class. Let's put down a really quick graph. We'll notice that there's lots of graphs starting out in this calculus class. To make this meaningful, it should be an applied problem, something that we're very familiar with. Let's make the horizontal axis not be an x-axis. Let's let it be t for time in hours. We'll make the vertical axis not a y-axis this time, but it'll be a lowercase d axis for distance in miles. And this is a pretty common experience. Whether you drive a car or not, if you ever look at a speedometer, calculus is going to tell us what's really going on. What is your speed? What is your instantaneous velocity? First, your graph might look like this. Your distance is 0, so you're right in your driveway, and time is 0, so your engine is started and you're just about to hit the accelerator. Once you tap that accelerator, the distance that you traveled starts to increase, and so does time. That might increase in a particular way, say slowly at first. I mean, you're in your neighborhood, you don't want to speed too fast. Maybe you got on the highway, so you're accelerating rapidly. You reach the speed limit, so you're not covering a lot of distance per time. Your distance is leveling out. And this might be the function we're exploring. Let's call this y equals f of x. Well, for that particular function, there's one thing that we're pretty interested in. If we are at a time, let's just call it generically A, maybe it's say 1 hour after leaving, maybe it's 0.5 or a half an hour after. And we want to know how fast we're going at that particular point in time. There's a new thing that we're really looking into. We put down a new line that looks like this. This will be called a tangent line. The equation for a tangent line like this would be y equals mx plus b. And this is what the course is really all about. Let me make that tangent line look, that's not too bad as a tangent line. We're really concerned about that slope right there. And if you know what the equation is for that line, then there it is, that's the slope. We could say m is going to be rise over run. That's just our generic mantra for what is the slope in the first place. The rise is going to be how far we go up and to the up as we move to the right. So that's going to be a change in distance. Divided by the run. Well, the run is how far you have to move to the right. Excuse me, let me try again. If you move up a little bit, the run is how far you have to move to the right to get back onto that tangent line. So this would be a change in time. And the units would then be, well, the new units you have for the numerator, miles, divided by the unit you have in the denominator. So we'll say P to be a per, miles per hour. And that's going to be our unit. So if we can find that slope m, then that tells us the speed that your car was going in terms of miles per hour. So if someone had a graph of the distance you covered for time, we could reverse engineer that graph and find your speed in miles per hour. We could do all sorts of other interesting things with calculus along these kinds of lines. So even though this is kind of a familiar concept as it occurs in, say, moving objects, same idea applies to maybe a population. Maybe this is time in years, this is P for the population size, and we're interested in this slope here still. That would be the growth rate of the population in a particular year. The question though becomes, how do you calculate that slope? There is just one point on here, and this is where calculus gets a little bit mysterious. We've been told over and over again, probably in an algebra class of some kind, you need 2 points to calculate the slope of a line. Well, that wasn't 100% accurate. That's context sensitive. if you know the function, you can in fact calculate the slope of this line, this random line right here, on one exact point. But the way you do it is you have to take a limit. So we'll say a little bit more about this, how it looks. We'll come back to this picture after we finish off chapter 2 and we discuss what a derivative is. A derivative is really just a particular kind of slope to see how all this kind of information connects. Well, I didn't want to go too far today, so I'll leave the picture like this and come back to it tomorrow, talk a little bit more about it. Then we'll start the course in earnest, say exactly what a limit is, work out limits visually and conceptually through these kinds of graphs. The next section 2.2 is going to be working out limits algebraically, so using algebra and the limiting process to come up with these values. And then when we get further and further to chapter 2, almost completing it, we'll come back to this picture and see how all these random mathematical topics about limits come right back to this, helping us find the slope of a line with one point. Again, it sounds kind of mysterious, exciting, even impossible, but we can do it. We just need a lot of extra machinery, the limit of a function, to enable us to do that. Well, let's end class here. I don't want to go too far because there's lots to unpack when it turns into a limit. That's a pretty big statement there. We should start off fresh when we come back on Thursday to start working through the limiting process, seeing how all this stuff works. But any last questions whatsoever, folks, before we call it a night today? Okay, well, when we come back, we'll start out fresh. We'll talk a little bit more about WebAssign itself, the book, working homework problems, and then dive back in these notes. June says, are there any concepts that we should feel very confident in going into this course? Anything I should review? I would say that's a really good question. The things that should be really good things to review would be anything algebraic wise as a topic. So think along things like, say, exponent laws would be a really good one to review. Things along the lines of dealing with fractions, rational functions, factoring, those kinds of things would be really great things to brush up and review. In fact, we'll be reviewing it too as we go through this course, how to factor polynomials, how to add up fractions involving polynomial functions, working with exponent laws as we go. But anything you do along those lines to refresh will be really very helpful. Any other questions at the moment? Okay, well, have a great night, folks. When class ends on a Tuesday, another thing I do is I kind of just open up questions like we did for the entire class. But if you have a couple more burning questions before I close out Zoom completely and leave the classroom, feel free to stay behind. I'll be happy to help out. That's for Tuesday. My schedule is kind of crazy. On Thursday, well, that's not a calendar. I thought a calendar would pop out. On Thursday, I teach another class that starts right at 6 o'clock. So I have a really short window on Thursdays, which is kind of unfortunate. I'll still call for questions, but I have to transition to the next class. But Tuesday is kind of wide open. If you have questions after class, I'll be happy to engage with you. But have a great night, everyone. We'll be back to it when we start on Thursday. Take care. Thanks, folks.
I had a question about one of the
Sure.
exams. Um, I'm going to be doing a major surgery on
Oh,
February 10th. Um, and so I'm not sure, like exam two, if I should be recovered by then. Um,
mhm.
would it, if I'm not, would it be possible to extend a week?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be very happy to put in that extension for you. What you could
Awesome.
do, which would help me out, is you can send me an email about this anytime, even today. And I'll just put a little star on that email. So I'll keep that in mind as we get closer and closer to that date. But yeah, I'm very happy to work with you getting through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Bye.